Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome, everyone,
Hi, everybody.
to Arcane Mark. Today, we're going to talk to you about a very important topic, which is auto-attacking in tabletop RPGs.
Have you ever gotten stuck into a rut in your game where it feels like every single turn that your character has looks the same as every other turn? Or notice the same thing happening with another player at your table where you know what? The archer is sure going to shoot arrows for their entire turn. And that's what's going to happen. It's going to look exactly the same. Oh, the mage over there is going to cast her favorite spell. She casts that spell every single turn.
Or at least to start every single fight.
Mm-hmm.
Given enough resources.
Yes. And when you start getting into that trap where fights just feel completely samey because everyone has this pattern that they do every single time. That's what we're going to be talking about today. How to break out of that
We're going to talk about why you might get into that trap.
Mm-hmm.
Why you might stay in that trap even after you start playing a game where that trap actually makes you more likely to lose. Because, stick around, the reason that you caught into that trap might have been from the games you were playing in the past. And we'll talk about how to break out, have more fun, and be more effective, too. So, to start out, what is this issue? What is this problem? What is auto-attacking as a term? So if you've played video game RPGs, or even some video games that aren't RPGs, the term auto-attacking is often used to just mean a low effort. If it's a video game like Final Fantasy where there's menus like attack, magic, skill, item, you just hit attack every time. And that's why it's auto-attack. Some of those games even had a feature called auto-attack where they would just, to turn it on, your party would all use attack over and over again. Now, auto-attacking was known to be a way that you could defeat easy monsters that in some of those games would just appear on the map every so many times you took a steps. And you just clear them out by auto-attacking. And this is not to say that it was a bad idea in those games. If you could get your characters to be strong enough to win just vying, using attacks and not wasting your resources, both the in-game resources of things like magic points or skill points, and your brain's resources of having to think and do a lot of mental gymnastics every single time one of these encounters, which in some of those games were very often, popped up, then it actually was more convenient and made the game faster and easier to just use auto-attacking in those cases where you're playing by yourself, high encounter rates, low throwaway danger of encounters.
And there's no GM who has to set up all the pieces. There aren't other players who have to coordinate everything. So those combats are going to go past fairly quickly. They're not something that, your GM has crafted to be like a different and entertaining encounter. They're more of either a challenge that grinds down your resources where you need to manage them, or if you're going back to an area, a way to see how much stronger you've become.
So, but how do we learn the habit, which is in many cases a bad habit for tabletop RPGs, of auto-attacking? Does it come from video games? For some people it does, but honestly, for a lot of people, the auto-attack habit actually comes because in some games, especially in some versions of Dungeons & Dragons and in Pathfinder 1st Edition, an auto-attack style gameplay, which could include auto-using your I win button spell if you're a spellcaster, or auto-attacking if you're a martial character, is actually a dominant strategy that can be the best strategy in some cases for you. It especially is an easy one to play. Because in some of these games, like D&D 3rd Edition, D&D 5th Edition, Pathfinder 1st Edition, you can build a character out of combat that is so powerful that they can win in combat on an auto-attack strategy or by using their best spells. This actually, when combined with Vancian-style magic, or Neo-Vancian magic in 5th edition, that is magic where you have a limited number of spell slots per day, or long rest, and until your next daily preparations, once you've used that spell, it's gone. So you want to find a way to not use the spells unless you're in a desperate strait and you have to.
Or even anything that has any kind of magic or skill points that deplete over time, and then you're looking at the conservation of resources. It doesn't have to be a strictly advanced.
It's not only those systems that have resource management that encourage you to try to find a way to build your character outside of the game, such that they can win on auto-attacking, which makes it easier for your brain power and easier on your resources, so that if a really, really hard fight hypothetically comes up that's strong enough to challenge even your ridiculously optimized build that can usually win on auto-attacking, then you also will have all of your resources. So, as a result, you had some builds that were like that. You also had some situations where someone didn't intend to make a very optimized build, but perhaps, for example, in D&D 5e, especially 2014, 2024 moves a little away from this, but not entirely. You could accidentally just make builds that were not even, didn't go online to make a hyper-optimized build, just you're playing normally and you're way stronger than the enemies are.
Yeah.
And in that case, maybe it wasn't a strategy you intentionally made to be so strong that you could auto-attack. You just found that auto-attacking was enough to win, even the fights that were supposed to be deadly. And so nothing ever forced you to learn how to do anything other than that.
Yeah, because auto-attacking is a really natural thing to start with when you're playing. You have the attack listed on your character sheet, and you can use it. But if you don't have to branch out, then, you may not learn to.
Right, because why would you? It takes additional mental effort. Some people, depending on your playstyle, if you are someone who maybe Magic the Gathering theory would call a Johnny, which is someone who just likes making complicated combos, almost like a Rube Goldberg machine or the old Mousetrap board game where just 10 things hit into each other and then you do something cool and clever at the end in order to succeed. Whether or not that's optimal, that's what Magic calls Spike, is the people who want it to be optimal. Johnny type players just want to do something complicated. And if you're not a Johnny, and that's not something that brings you joy, it's probably easiest to fall back on something default, like an auto-attack strategy. You won't use anything more complicated than that unless you have to win on the difficulty level that you are playing.
However, as I one of the drawbacks of that, which I'm also seeing talked about in chat, is, it can be really boring to just do the same thing every time. And that tension between, oh man, the optimal thing is to do the same routine I've done in the last 50 combats, but I'm really sick of doing that same routine. Oh, it's my turn again. Guess I'll toss a few dice. Oop, I hit. Oop, I missed. Okay, moving on.
Yes, absolutely. And we see in chat that talk about a theory which is very prevalent in, for instance, 5e. It's very prevalent in 3rd edition D&D, Pathfinder 1. Somewhat in Pathfinder 2, but I think there's more nuance on it because of some of the changes that were made in the game's difficulty level and what some of the non-damage-based things you can do are. The thought that if you don't deal enough damage to take someone out of the fight or use an incapacitation effect to knock them out of the fight, then you might as well just be doing that, because you can just blitz down your opponents, then they're gone and they can't do anything else. And, the best condition is the dead condition, right? Is the sort of condensation of that. And in 3rd edition, in Pathfinder 1, in D&D 5e, it's relatively easy to build or optimize a character who can just take the enemy to dead before they're likely to be able to do anything that can actually stop you. Or, at worst, cause a rocket tag situation where the really weird overpowered abilities of the monster could kill you if they get a turn, but your initiative is high enough, you're probably going to go first and kill them, and it really comes down to who gets a turn first that determines the outcome. So, now that we've sort of set up this issue, we've explained why it happened. It didn't happen because you were lazy. It didn't happen because you don't know any better or you're not creative or imaginative. It happened because the games you were playing got your brain into a structure that put you into the mindset of taking this path out. Because the easier path was, the path of least resistance was enough. So now let's move on. you either are playing a game where it is easy enough to win on auto attack, but you have a Johnny player or someone who's getting bored of auto attacking and wants to try something new. Or you've moved into a game system where auto attack style, which includes the auto cast my win spell every time, is not sufficient and you have to use more complex tactics, or you actually have a decent chance of losing. One example of this game often is Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people who come on to like the Reddit or other places online and be like, I think this game is too hard. We went in and we got killed. And there'll be a lot of different reasons this happens, but one of them sometimes is that they were just making auto attacks. And look, that doesn't make you, if you were just using auto attacks, that doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make it so that you're not smart enough to play the game or anything like that. In fact, I can tell you that a professional game developer with a large amount of experience, when they were exposed to Alpha Pathfinder 2nd Edition, their cleric, not their fighter, not the rogue, the cleric that they were playing auto-attacked all 3 times. When finding out that the action system per Pathfinder 2 would allow them to attack 3 times, and they were low level, they're like, what? I can attack 3 times? They attacked all 3 times. Whenever anybody was like, yeah, well, maybe, do you want to raise your shield? Do you want to heal one of us? Like, we're all kind of hurt. Do you want to cast Bless or any of your spells? He's like, no, I could attack 3 times. And the only thing he did throughout the entire session was attack 3 times. Okay? So you will be in good company if that's sort of your first instinct. Because it can feel awesome that you can attack a lot of times. Right? However, that is not your best move in most situations. There is more that you can do in the game other than attack. Obviously, if you don't make any move towards some kind of offense or some kind of setup that will make the encounter end, no amount of defense is going to end the fight. Eventually, if all you have is infinite defense, everyone's just going to get bored. And maybe your enemy will leave because they'll be like, well, I guess we can't win.
Yeah.
Nobody can win. But you'll also have some fights eventually that have conditions other than just defeat the enemy or survive, and you won't be able to like protect NPCs who are in trouble or stop a fire from burning or whatever if the only thing you could do is sit there and cause stasis with constant like healing or tanking or things like that. So we're definitely not saying in this video that you should never attack or that you should never incorporate offense into your strategy. We're just saying you don't really want a team of 4 people who are all just attacking constantly all the time in Pathfinder 2 to make your strongest play for winning. And to be more fun, you don't really want that in most tabletop RPGs either.
So in terms of things that you can do, there's often ways that you can modify the environment that you're fighting in or learn more about the environment that you're fighting in so that you can choose more effective strategies. In Pathfinder 2nd Edition, for example, you might be using recall knowledge to learn about your enemies, or you might be, and other games have means too where you can try to study what's going on to make sense of it. You can try to change the flow of things by changing your positioning on the battlefield to force the enemies to have to go in a different place. You can try to create obstacles, whether you're doing that physically or magically. You can move yourself, say, to higher ground or behind a barrier to set yourself up better.
So movement, obstacles, and battlefield control are low-key some of the most powerful effects in most tabletop role-playing games. Now, in Dungeons & Dragons 5e specifically, because of the fact that movement is sort of its own thing and can be split up before and after an action, it is very binary. If everybody has about the same amount of movement and you're not being very, very particular with it, you might wind up in a situation where you are always ending your turn within the movement of other people, even if they move away after they go after you. And so, therefore, the movement doesn't matter. Now, that does mean it's easier to abstract it away, which can be better if you want to run it gridless. But, on the other hand, when you are in a game where the movement actually costs something that can be used for something other than movement, or where it has to be before or after your attacks, or even in D&D, if you're up against someone with much higher movement speed than you, or you are that person with the higher movement speed, movement is extremely powerful. It's not even just in tabletop role-playing games. If you're playing a tactical role-playing game, like a video game or something like that, you want to win Fire Emblem on the hardest difficulty modes, movement and range are the two most powerful ways to do that. Be somewhere where you cannot be attacked.
If you're fighting against a melee bruiser who technically has a backup bow but is all about their great axe, do what you can to make it so they've got to either waste a lot of time resources coming up to you or attack you with their flimsy bow.
That's right.
Can you get to the other side of... can you outrange them and move around? Can you get them to a place where they'd have to trudge through an area that's difficult or dangerous to cross if they want to reach you?
Exactly. Like, suppose you're in a situation where you're doing these fights and you're losing when you're just auto-attacking all of the time in Pathfinder 2. And instead of auto-attacking or trying to use your, if they really fail to save, they're out of the fight, win or not spells, what if you used movement? What if you used battlefield control? Suppose you used a wall of stone and you didn't try to cheese some of the stuff that you could theoretically do with it. You just used it for a very basic, completely milquetoast and obviously allowable thing of making a single, vertical, mostly straight wall that separated one of the enemies from the rest of the ones in the encounter. Now, the others are going to bash it down, but by the time they can do that, the rest of your party, let's say you're all on the side with the one separated opponent, has now changed that big, hard encounter into a very easy encounter with another encounter that's mostly as hard as before that comes after that first encounter. And the tempo of that is extremely good for your group. Chances are you might be able to beat that one opponent who's on your side of the wall with less than your full party working together on it. In which case, the rest of your party could do things like heal up, cast buffs in anticipation of the other enemies bashing through the wall, or things like that. And you don't even need a wall for that. You can move, like Linda said, you can get to higher ground. You can try to get into a position where the opponents can't reach you. All of these tactics are really effective.
You can also take actions that that will require your opponent to spend time to recover from, or temporarily or permanently remove some of their abilities. For example, if you trip your opponent and then they have to get up before they can move around, or if you steal your opponent's weapon and then they can't attack with that weapon anymore.
Right. And Matt Guy gave an example from 5e of what we were talking about before. Even in 5e, if somebody has very high movement speed, which could be you or your enemy, you can absolutely do strategies where movement matter in 5e. Matt Guy Dave's example was a monk with very fast movement grabbing an enemy and moving them so far away from anyone else that they can only attack the monk. And that's a great example. That's a great example even in 5e where the movement is free and can come at any time. So the point is that people say, only death is the most powerful condition, and it is, if you can do that. But partially damaging an opponent in games like Pathfinder or D&D doesn't do anything. In some games, partially damaged opponents actually take penalties as they're going down. That's a different story. But what does give you an equal amount of protection to having the enemy be dead
is having them not be able to reach you.
Yes, exactly. Any other way that the enemy can't attack you.
Or if you can't prevent them from attacking you altogether, you can do things that make their attacks less accurate, whether you're increasing your defenses or decreasing their offensive power.
Also, we mathematically showed in one of our other videos, which you should check out. It's we have Arcane Math video. The defense can actually raise your offensive damage. If you're facing against enemies that are not a total joke, and look, in some RPGs they are a joke. They're never going to drop any of your party members because you're so optimized they can't. But even if in some of the games like 3.5 or Pathfinder 1 where you can make really cheesy characters, some of the enemies also had cheesy abilities that could take you out. And defense, keeping a party member in the fight so they can keep attacking, can actually wind up causing more damage than having to do triage once they already fall over to save them and bring them back into the fight. Or even not doing triage and be like, they probably won't die, I'll just leave them on the floor.
And then they lose all those turns.
Then they lose all those turns that they're not back in the fight.
And putting up, say, a defensive buff or something like that can be a lot more efficient than the amount of resources and time that it takes to heal them up after they've taken damage, if you prevent multiple hits.
Correct.
Especially.
And Math Guy Dave pointed out, in 4th edition D&D, especially since Bloodied was a condition, sometimes the enemies got more dangerous when they were low on health because you did too much damage too quickly and they entered into their danger mode. Kind of like the MMO style where enemies can often get stronger as their health bar goes down. That definitely is true. So, defense can actually raise your damage by keeping the damage dealers in the fight, defense and healing. And furthermore, things like moving and using a battlefield control can be an incredibly powerful and effective tactic. Now, sometimes, look, I get it. You don't have something as game-changing as one of those two effects that you can put into play. It can still be better not to just attack if there's something else that you could do that can create a pseudo effect like that. For example, what if you trip the opponent and now they can't reach anybody? Even in D&D, if you trip them, they lose some of their movement. And that might make the difference between whether or not they have enough movement to catch up to anybody or not. If you trip them, lower their movement, say you're the monk, then you run away, and then they might not have enough movement after standing up to reach your other party member.
Or maybe, you throw sand in their eyes and they're going to have to, then it's going to be harder for them to see until they wipe it out. There's a lot of types of things you can do that are going to, depending on your game system, that are going to require some time for the opponent to get back to full strength. And, maybe they can have a choice. They can be, less accurate with their attacks, or they can take the time to get the sand out of their eyes. And either way, you cost them something.
In Pathfinder 2, if you trip the opponent and genuinely move out of their range, that opponent now will need to stand up, move back. They're only going to have one action to do anything to your group. If that's a higher level opponent who had bad reflex, and therefore that's why you knew you could trip them successfully with a high probability, maybe even with assurance, if you're really lucky and the reflex is very low, then they're not going to be in good shape. You could even make a joke out of them if they're actually in the range that assurance can trip them. Because with only one action, even a dangerous boss is not going to be able to actually threaten your party too much. Maybe at very low levels where one crit can take your party member from full to dying. But once you get past that point, that honestly is a fight that you've almost solved.
Yeah. I think that, auto attack can be the most troublesome whenever it runs into encounters that auto attack really can't solve. So, for example, continuing to attack a creature over and over again that has, let's say that you're using a slashing weapon, and the opponent that you're fighting is highly resistant against slashing, so you're doing no damage or almost no damage. And, then you're just doing things over and over again and not being particularly effective at it. Or, your go-to thing is to throw spells that are reflex save type spells, but this opponent has a really, really high reflex save, and so that's not really happening. In that case, you're often better off looking for ways that you can either change your strategy to another type of offensive thing that you can do, or focus your turn on helping your fellow party members who have tools that are better suited to this encounter for dealing damage be more successful.
That's right. Now, look. This advice that we're giving of don't just attack, it might not be true in some tabletop RPGs. We already talked about how you can learn habits from Pathfinder 1st edition or 3rd edition D&D. And to be clear, one of the biggest flaws of those systems that I definitely enjoyed, but even when I was asked on my interview for Paizo, what is the one thing that you think holds back the Pathfinder 1 system the most, I actually said it was exactly this problem. The fact that if you full attack in Pathfinder 1, especially if you have an optimized character, you might have a situation where full attacking lets you do 400 damage, which to be clear for people who didn't play Pathfinder 1, will kill just about anything in the game,
Yes.
possibly multiple things. It's like, if my archer full attacks, I can do 400 damage. If I don't, I can do, like, 40 at most.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And also, anytime I decide I'm going to swing on a chandelier, then, yeah, I might do 40 on the chandelier and not 400. It was a serious problem because the sheer amount that the full attack activity allowed you to do was so much higher than anything else that even features that were created for Pathfinder 1 to try to get you to do anything else. Like, oh yeah, Vital Strike, if you don't full attack, we'll give you all this extra damage, but it wasn't enough extra damage. And you'd have to offer like an almost obscene amount of bribery to make another action worth it, at which point, at that point, that action then became
the thing that action's
meta
then
action.
king. Yeah.
So, I want to make it clear that this advice we're giving here is generally true in RPGs where you either want to have fun by doing different actions, or B, where you don't have something as problematic towards attack zombieing as 3rd edition Pathfinder 1, which causes those additions to teach the sort of auto attack. Because those legitimately you were kneecapping your character's ability to contribute if you didn't take a full attack. It's one of the issues Swashbuckler class had back in Pathfinder 1st edition, was just like, Swashbucklers want to do crazy, daring do actions, but if you do anything except for full attack, you've lost everything.
I see in comment, it sounds almost like map in PF2 was a response to the PF1 full attack. I would say probably the 3-action economy was more of a response.
It was the 3-action economy.
Because there was a penalty.
Full attack did have multiple attack penalties.
Yeah, but it was more like you can spend, it would be more like the equivalent of you can spend 1 action to attack 3 times.
Yes, the Pathfinder 1 full attack had a penalty that was exactly the same as multiple attack penalty, to be clear. However, the difference is that, the difference was this, just for those who didn't play Pathfinder 1 or 3.5. Often your character would be doing something like this. You'd be like, alright, so the enemy has 26 armor class. So I've got 5 attacks because of haste. Or maybe if I'm an archer, I actually can pull out an additional 2 from rapid shot and many tests. So I actually have 7, although I only make 6 attack rolls for it, right? Okay. So my first attack is at plus 92.
Okay, that's...
Now, when I have something called Deadly Aim, which I'm very high level. But
this is a slight exaggeration.
I'm very high level. I'm level 20.
Yeah, okay.
I can take a minus 6 from penalty, so I'm down to plus 86. Now, you might not have 92 if your group didn't let you use all the different player companions and different books that were out there, because there was like a Akashic form that would like add your entire caster level to every check that you made for a minute as an insight bonus or something like that. There was a lot of things you could do. Maybe you'd only have 72 without that, and maybe there's some other cheesy thing that I put in there that once it was removed, you'd only be buffed up into the 60s. Against armor class 26. So when you lose 6 from Deadly Aim, that would take you from 92 to 86. Now, your second attack would be... Now, with Rapid Shot, you go down to 84. And your second attack would be 79. And by second, I actually mean your bonus other attack would still be at
the top bonus,
but
yes.
you'd eventually have one that was at 79, one that was at 74, and then one that was all the way down to 69. So, when you add that to any roll on the d20, that was more than 26, which was the enemy's armor class. Now, actually, at level 20, they may have had armor class that was higher than 26. It probably would have been like 30 something.
But the point is...
But the point is that you would definitely hit no matter what.
And okay, maybe you weren't quite that ridiculous. Maybe you could miss on your final attack on a 3 or something. But still.
But the difference was, if you didn't full attack, you only got that first attack that was at plus 86. You didn't get the other ones. And since they were all extremely likely to hit, that they caused the difference between a full attack and not a full attack to be ridiculously large. Now... all that being said, we started the beginning by saying, and so did people in chat to Kojo, that, well, you know, having multiple attack penalty in Pathfinder 2 wasn't really a reaction to Pathfinder 1 because it already had that penalty. On the other hand, keeping multiple attack penalty in the game instead of removing it, which was something, removing it was something that 5th edition D&D did, is, you could say is part of the lesson learned, is that Pathfinder 2 actually has armor classes that you cannot hit very easily with the -10.
Yes.
And it kept the penalty. Although it limited it to -10 at most. Because in Pathfinder 1, you could have one that was at -15. Then again, it didn't matter because you would hit at -15 anyway. So you could say that the idea that those lower attacks should be deprecated, except for that the math should work so they actually are deprecated, was something that was carried over. And that was intentionally a means to an end, to make it so that you are being mathematically incentivized to stop auto-attacking and to do something else. Anything else that doesn't add the multiple attack penalty. Because we want you to try something else. Now, multiple attack penalty is not the only way to do that. Cosmere RPG also uses a 3-action system just like Pathfinder, and the way they incentivize not multi-attacking is that they don't let you. They don't want you to have to do math, so you don't have a multiple attack penalty. You just can't do another attack. Each of the actions that you can take, unless it says otherwise, can only be taken once per turn. So you have to do 3 different things unless you happen to have found an action that lets you repeat, or taken a character level up option that specifically allows you to attack twice. So there's a lot of different ways of dealing with this. And multiple attack penalty is not the only way. So it is fair to say that if your tabletop RPG is built in a way that auto-attacking is actually more powerful, then you know what? You can win more by doing it, but it still might be fun not to do that.
Yeah. And you might still consider taking options that let you shake things up in terms of, you know, trying different weapons, or maybe there's some kind of a combo that you'd like to pull together.
Absolutely.
Because if you can win, you know, if it's the situation that your party is always going to win against every monster, then maybe you can look at other goals that you're trying to achieve. Maybe you're trying to win against monsters with less risk of taking damage for your party, for example. Or trying to find more sustainable ways to win.
Yes, absolutely. And so when you're looking at what you're going to do other than attacking, think of what you find fun. Maybe we talked about the wall and moving away, and you're like, I don't like moving away. To be fair, I've actually polled at one point to see online on like the Pathfinder 2 Reddit, and a lot of people don't like moving away. I asked it in a certain situation because of the fact that I had been I've been playing in a game, and we encountered a room where the melee using bosses were in a complex hazard. And we saw that they were in a complex hazard, so we shot at them from as far away as we could, because there was like a hallway. We shot from the hallway into the room with the hazard, and got the enemies to come after us out into the hallway, and we fought them there, instead of in the room with the hazard. And some of the other playtesters who were in that playtest were like, that's a very weird thing, that your group actually was okay with doing that. That doesn't make any sense. No group I played with would have ever done that. The melee, because there were 2 characters who specialized in melee, who did start by using ranged attacks, and they dropped it and drew their melee weapons when the enemies came in. There's no way they would have done that. They would have run right into the complex hazard, for sure. And I was like, that's so weird. That seems suicidal to me, to do that. Like, that's interesting. So I went on the Pathfinder 2 subreddit, which is a very tactical subreddit overall. If you go on there, it's a great place. They'll give you advice about not just auto-attacking, the same advice we're giving in this video. They'll tell you all sorts of other things you can do. But when I made my thread on there about it, a lot of people were like, yeah, there's no way. There's no way they wouldn't have just run right into the explosive.
I'd love to take damage and explode instead of taking a round or 2, not doing my most optimal damage.
The funny thing is, afterwards, we calculated what would have happened if we went into the complex hazard, because one of the melee characters who was the most frustrated about making the ranged attack, because she was the worst at the ranged attacks, also got hurt bad even with our strategy, and we determined she would have died because of being in the complex hazard if she had rushed in.
Yeah.
But a lot of people said that. Now, there were also a decent number of people on the subreddit who were like, yeah, Marg, that's totally what we would have done as well. And then at least one person was like, Marg, you're actually playing in an OSR style, but the Pathfinder 2 style, a lot of people would have just rushed into the room, which was a very interesting answer to me, to be clear. So the point that I'm saying is, if moving away, changing the battlefield conditions, constructing walls and things like that is not your wheelhouse, and rushing in is more your wheelhouse, you might find things like raising a shield to make more sense. It's in the same way that some groups love trying to recall knowledge to learn more about the monsters and take advantage of their weaknesses and idiosyncrasies, and other groups don't. Partially because of the way the GM runs it, partially just because maybe it doesn't sound as fun to be the person who knows about the monster than it does
and they want to
do
you want to
something.
discover firsthand by seeing what works well and what doesn't when you try it.
Absolutely.
As opposed to checking in advance.
So the key is there's not just one optimization answer of, so what do I do if it's not attacking? There's so many things you can do other than attacking. Find something that sparks joy in your heart that isn't attacking. And it might be that maybe you only love offense. So the thing that sparks joy in your heart that isn't attacking is buffing offense. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? You could do something like, for example, in Pathfinder 2, multi-classing Bard. And then one of your actions is that you buff the parties with a +1 to attack and damage, including yourself. And then you just attack with everything else. Like, even that small change will not only maybe make things more thematic, because you can talk about how you're performing your performance to buff the party, it actually will put up your party's performance in terms of damage by a lot. Unless you were like in a weird party where you were one of the only, maybe one of two, or maybe the only damage dealer, even then, you're trading it for usually a third attack.
Yeah. And
you're just in a weird situation when you're the only damage dealer. It may be true that a +1 to hit and damage is actually still not worth it compared to the third attack at a -10. If you're literally the only person who uses attack rolls. But then you can find something else that will probably work with that group. So
I'm seeing a question in chat. Let's see.
Okay, what is the
question? I tend to fall into a flowchart Ken meme. While on the surface I look like I'm doing a bunch of different things. In practice, it's mostly a flowchart. For example, I'm slightly far away, sudden charge, otherwise strike. Action 2 is exacting strike. Action 3 is a third attempt if I miss an action 2, or assurance trip if likely, or... So, it looks like this question... I don't see a direct question here, but the implied question may be like, what if I have a definitive pattern that I always do, but it's not auto-attack, but I come up with more of a flowchart and that I'm always writing down that?
So, I'm going to say this, which is... You are in a situation where some players, to even have made a flowchart out to that complexity, is to like the edge of what they can handle with their character. So I would say that if for you that feels like that flowchart isn't enough different varieties of things to do, then you might want to try to find more things to do than that. But if you're feeling that your flowchart, it's a flowchart, but it's providing a decent amount of variety, and every time a weird situation that doesn't fall exactly into your flowchart comes up, because the encounters are different, or unusual, or in an unusual area, or against a monster with a special ability that challenges your expectations, then maybe that flowchart is enough. It just depends on who you are. For many players, I think a flowchart out to that degree would provide a decent amount of variety. If you're very Johnny, it might not. And you might actually find that even with weird encounters, weird locations, weird hazards, and weird creatures, it's still too simple of a flowchart. That might actually mean you want a different character build. That's one of the joys of a system like Pathfinder 2, or even D&D 5e in that regard compared to, say, 4e, is that 4e had the same amount of complexity load on each class. And it actually, at higher levels, could get to a decent amount of complexity when you pulled up a certain number of abilities. But you couldn't actually choose a class to intentionally have less or more. But in Pathfinder 2, you can. So you might find, if you're extremely Johnny and you like very, very complicated interactions, and not even that flowchart is not complicated enough, that you might find that the class you're in actually doesn't create enough complexity.
Yeah, I would say that oftentimes, if you're that type of player, you may do better with a character that's more like the prepared spellcaster type, that's capable of switching up what tools they have available on a regular basis. Or somebody that, or, maybe you might, if you're playing more of a martial character, maybe retrain some of your abilities so that some of the tools go out of your toolkit and other ones come back in.
That's right. Pathfinder says a definitive pattern for Pathfinder 2e might be rogue, trip, strike, preparation, and then reaction 3 times using Eagle Knight. I mean, to be fair, one could say maybe Eagle Knight should not have given another easy way to get a third reaction in that case, if that has become the definitive pattern. You might consider not allowing every single character to play an Eagle Knight, or not allowing Eagle Knight to give an additional reaction. You could take that out of Eagle Knight if it's being like, it's no longer about Andoran, it's about optimization.
Everyone takes this one, yes.
So that's just, I would say, especially if it's from like a Lost Omens book or an adventure path, and you found that it's now a definitive pattern in your games, you might not want that to be there anymore, because it's probably not doing its job if what it's doing is creating a definitive pattern of play.
I'd say another thing to consider might be, try saying, okay, I can't do try saying, I'm not going to do whatever my normal thing on this flowchart note is. What could be something else that I could do in this particular situation? And see if there's another alternative you can think of, because you might learn something new from that too.
Yes. And we're seeing some answers in chat that maybe the person who asked that question just thinks in flowcharts. So even if you give a weird situation that breaks the flowchart, then he adds a note to the flowchart. It's like, okay, at that point, then anything you do is going to be a flowchart. Just make it be a very complicated flowchart that has some very low probability niche things on it. Like, as an example in chat, if water first turn into shark, then do the next thing on the flow, then go back to this first note of the flowchart. So if you just think in flowcharts, then it's not a problem that everything is a flowchart, because ultimately, you could theoretically have like the world's most convoluted flowchart and cover almost any possibility that you could come up with.
That may suggest that there's not that you would want something that has more encounter variety too. But I still think that going back to like the prepared spellcaster or other person who can trade out and switch up what abilities they have available each day, so that they have to do different things.
Absolutely. So,
or like I see that I mentioned here, having the same problem with Eldabon, pretty consistently using specific powers and specific orders.
Yeah, you know what? I definitely have orders for my Eldamon and Elemental Avatar of the powers which, like, agnostic of the situation in the fight, this is what I would like to do if you are just going to sit there, you're like bowling pins at the end of the bowling alley and let me hit you with my best moves. This is what I would do. And I tend to find that the amount of times I can actually do that exactly as I would want is relatively low. However, that being said, since I have 3 powers, you could make a flowchart with 3 different branches.
Yeah. And
then after those 3 branches, 2 branches each, right? And because there's only 6 different orders that you can use 3 powers in. So even if, like, the limit to which an Eldamon turn, other than, like, early refresh, you can maybe add on more branches for that, is already going to be limited to 6 branches on the flowchart. In some ways, that can be a benefit for its ability to be played by players who couldn't handle a situation where it's like, yeah, what am I going to do now? Let's say I have Pathfinder First Edition's Bonded Item ability, which allows me to cast any spell from my entire spell book, which is full of 200 spells.
Yeah.
And they would be like,
Or I could see with Eldamon, for example, if you're playing an Eldamon trainer and then you get a stable of Eldamon, say you put your Eldamon on a random chart and then randomly determine which ones you bring, and then you'll have, by default, some different stats and synergies.
That's right. So I think that it's no longer an auto attack if you have a flow chart with some degree of complexity. I would consider an auto attack to be strike, 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 or for the spellcaster, if you have your, like...
It might be, I have this cantrip, I will cast this cantrip every time unless it's a dangerous enemy, and then I will cast
or
this
another
spell.
example of that, I would say, is like Heaven's Oracle Pathfinder 1 Color Spray, which they had the ability to basically color spray anything into submission. Normally there was a hit dice limit. But they got to add such a high amount that it didn't matter, and they just knock you out. So a Heaven's Oracle being like, oh yeah, the number of color sprays I can do per day is like 20. So just going up to every fight and casting color spray every turn, unless it was immune to visual effects or illusions or something like that.
And there's another thing I see mentioned in chat, which is you can also take a look at items as a way to diversify your options.
100%. Items are a fantastic way to not do the exact options that Linda and I have said in here, but still give yourself some extra thing to do. Think about what your normal routine looks like and what kind of gaps you find in your routine, and try to buy items that take the kind of actions you don't use a lot. For instance, if you have a reaction that's powerful but situational, you might want an item that gives you a reaction that's easy to use, like right before your turn is about to come and it's become clear that you're not going to be able to use the powerful and situational reaction, and use that. Or if you often find that you are not in a class like Magus that constrains every single one of your actions and you have a spare action somewhere, grab some one action abilities that are good.
I see a comment, Needle Dart Shield. Those are my those are my 3 actions.
No, I get it.
Yeah,
we did that a lot in Dawn's Berry Days. That is a result of needle darts being notably overpowered for many of the levels of the game.
But sometimes it's worth, if you find yourself saying, I'm always going to take this every single time, saying, okay, I'm going to build a character, and I'm going to put a limitation for myself that I'm not going to select that option that I know if I pick it, I'm just going to use it all the time.
That's right.
If you're like, darn it, my last 3 spellcasters have just wound up casting needle darts on most of their turns, I'm sick to death of needle darts. But you know that if you have needle darts, you're just going to keep casting it, then saying, all right, this character doesn't have needle darts.
And by the way, it's not like needle darts ruins the game.
No, I'm not saying that. It's
neither of us said that it does. It's not what I would call an S tier problem. An S tier is a problem because it actually kind of harms the game's balance by existing, or can be used in extremely problematic combos. A tier is something that you also kind of don't want to have because it's just better than everything else but doesn't harm the game. And needle darts is in that spot. Not even for all ranks, because at higher ranks, there's things that scale up to be more. But at lower ranks, because its starting amount is so high, needle darts is at A tier, where it's not going to break the game out of its hinges. It's just so much better than everything else. It's the only thing that you're going to do.
Yeah. I don't mean to put everything on needle darts. I'm just saying this was a specific example.
Needle darts is a great example of it. And if you watch us playing Dawn's Berry Days, when we were not doing the essence casting system, you will see a lot of needle darts. You definitely will. And Pathfinder gives examples of S tier as Peace Cleric and Twilight Cleric in D&D 5e. Sure. And one example of something that is potentially S tier in PF2, which doesn't have very many of them, is going to be Resentment Witch, because of the fact that, as it is written, there are innocuous spells and effects that currently aren't written yet, but that could be written at any time, that go from innocuous, completely reasonable, to with resentment and auto win. Effects such as, you stop opponents from taking reactions against you by temporarily stunning them. They roll a will save. Success. They are stunned, but just until the end of your current turn that you cast this spell for 2 actions, where it would be like, okay, on a successful save, they're stunned until the end of my own turn for 2 actions. I didn't do much. That's fair to do on a successful save for 2 actions. I spent 2 actions. They were only stunned on my turn, not even on their turn. But with Resentment, you could therefore turn it into a stun lock forever on a successful save, if that spell was ever written, for example. So that puts that into the S tier, not even necessarily because of what it can be done with the effects that currently exist, although it can do some egregious things with those, but because of the fact that it permanently makes multiple things in the future incredibly dangerous to print that otherwise would be
innocuous. When you have an ability that every other ability thereafter has to take into account the fact that it causes potential issues for interactivity, then it's
and Pathfinder calls it the birthing pod problem from Magic the Gathering, that it warps the design space of everything ever printed in the future. That's right. Magic has, at least during the times that I played it, which was quite a while ago, it had issues where they would ban a new card would come out that warped a bunch of other cards, and they would ban a bunch of very innocuous cards so that they didn't have to ban the new card. Where it was just like, when Tolarian Academy came out, there were a bunch of things. It was like, we know Candelabra of Tawnos is not a power card, okay? But it was banned at one point because of Tolarian Academy, because being able to tap and get an amount of mana equal to your number of artifacts, which should have been banned, made it so that having an artifact that you could pay X and tap to untap X things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if one of them was the Tolarian Academy, you could like create a nearly infinite mana loop right away.
You gotta look at the actual source of the issue.
Exactly. So, in this sense, you can see that Pathfinder 2 is an example of a game that encourages you to do things more than just auto-attack. That doesn't mean it's the only one you can. And it is possible to build characters who aren't auto-attack based, even in a game like Pathfinder 1, where you're kind of encouraged to find some powerful spell that will knock the foes out of the fight, or if you're a martial, to do full attacks that will let you get massive amounts of damage that will end the battles quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So, Math Guy Dave says, can you talk about essence casting? I almost suggested it as a number 6.
Oh, probably for the poll.
Oh, for the poll. Yeah, I mean, we could put it as number 6 on the poll. It's out at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer something that had never come out yet. So anybody could read about it at this point. All right. So there's one last thing to think about when you're thinking about whether auto-attacking to try to get the dead condition is a good idea compared to putting up buffs or something else like that. We can talk all we want about what the expectations are, what is likely to give you a better result. But the truth of it is that using a defensive strategy is not only expected to give you a better result because it keeps your person active and up dealing the damage, it's also more proof against variance. And when you are the player characters who are expected to somehow make it from the beginning to the end of a game full of dice rolls that could go either way, what you want is to be proof against variance.
Yes.
Because if you have to fight 20 fights per level, and you have to, and they fight 20 levels, and you're fighting 400 fights, if there is something that is in the game that will make you TPK with only like a 1 in 1,000 chance, you probably won't with the 1 in 1,000 chance, but you have a pretty decent chance to TPK in those 400 battles if you have a 1 in 1,000 chance.
So if you help control for, how bad is it really if you get super unlucky?
Exactly. And so having a strategy that's based on damage is all well and good, except for when it doesn't do enough and you didn't take them out of the fight and all the monsters are still up and then they make a counterattack
and now
on
you get surrounded and swarmed.
And you don't have defense, you don't have healing, you don't have support. You were not actually very resilient against a mistake or, the dice gods hating you. Even in the example we gave of Pathfinder first, where you might have had plus 92, and that was a plus 86 after using or 84 after all the self-inflicted penalties or whatever, a natural 1 would still miss. And if you rolled those 6 attack rolls and 3 of them, including the first one that gives 2 arrows, were natural 1s, you could suddenly find that
wasn't there a thing where when you rolled a natural 1 that it ended the chain too?
That was an optional rule.
Oh,
so
okay.
If you're not playing with that one, you could suddenly find that you lost over half of the damage you expected to deal. And instead of just easily pulping the monster, it's still up and it counterattacks and you didn't have a response to that because you were focused entirely on auto-attacking. So keep in mind that having a diverse strategy pool is crucial to being resilient towards not only bad dice rolls, but weird situations that come up, interesting or unusual battles that don't allow you to use your top strategy because the enemy's in a weird spot and you can't get to them with your typical strategy, or the environment or hazard is causing some strange effect that requires you to think of things in a different way. And
you might consider too, if you're in a fight that is going to be an easy fight, that can be a safe time to try out some of those alternate strategies because the stakes aren't so high and you can learn new ways that your group can work together.
Yes, absolutely. So, if you follow the advice from this video, if you want to follow one part of it, all we're saying is, instead of attacking, think, do I want to do something else? What else could I accomplish instead of this attack? Now, the answer might be, not much, I'll attack. Sometimes it is. Sometimes that's the right answer. We're also not saying you should never attack.
Yeah.
We're not even saying you should never make a -10 multiple attack penalty
If
attack.
there's an ooze in front of
Pathfinder.
you, then you probably might want to.
Even if it's not an ooze, even if it's something where you look at it, I've done it. If you watched us playing Donsbury Days, we've done it where we're like, oh, Donsbury Days is even telling us this third attack has a 20% chance of hitting. We're taking it. Because we looked at the enemy's hit points, which Donsbury Days let you see, and we're like, if that does hit,
then they're out.
They're out. And yes, that isn't the good risk-averse strategy of controlling for variance, but it also gave a high reward for that 20%.
Yeah, and it's more entertaining, too, if, even if you decide to auto-attack 90% of the time and do something else 10% of the time, you'll still feel more engaged of each time you go in. You're asking, do I auto-attack this time or do I do something else? Instead of just assuming every time I'm just going to auto-attack.
You'll feel like you thought about it and you'll feel fulfilled with the choice you made to auto-attack. And you know what? For all I know, the guy who did only auto-attack with his cleric really was thinking about healing and raising his shield all the other times. It looked to me like he was just
excited that he got to
He was just excited and he just auto-attacked. But he may have been very carefully planning things out even when people were dying and just be like, no, they won't get to dead, which they didn't. They never did get to dead.
Yes.
He also never hit with those third attacks either, but he was right that they didn't die. And so it may have been on purpose, it may have just been excitement of attacking. But if you think about it more, it increases the depth, and if that increases your enjoyment of the game, that's great. If you actually feel that just kind of gets stressful or overloads your thought processing and you don't want to spend brain cycles on that, you'd rather spend on role-playing or something else in the game, you know what?
Yeah.
Then it's okay to auto-attack. In Pathfinder 2, try to create a build that lets you auto-attack, either from something like a Flurry Ranger who gets a lower multiple attack penalty, or a character that can auto-attack more easily because their auto-attack is actually something like a Magus' Spell Strike that's a little bit more complicated of an auto-attack and therefore doesn't worry about too many multiple attacks.
Or a character who has a repeated build that they always do that isn't 100% auto-attack. Like a character that has a shield, for example, that's like, I will get in my enemy's face, I will attack them as many times as I can until I have my last action left, and then I'll put my shield up.
Exactly. So follow this advice, and hopefully you'll have more fun while being more effective in your game, whether it's Pathfinder 2 or really any other tabletop RPG, with exception of the 3.x PF1 where maybe your full attack actually was better. All right, so if you like this kind of content, want to see more of it, please like and subscribe, or you can even follow us if you'd like to support. Let's vote for our next episode of Arcane Marg, and we had a vote for other of being Essence casting, and so I will put 7 as other and 6 as Essence casting.
And like Koja was saying there, there's nothing wrong with if you want to do predictable turns. So this sort of is an episode that's about, hey, it kind of presumes I'm doing predictable turns and I'm not happy about it. Whereas if you are doing predictable turns and you are happy about it, you don't need this episode. You're already having a good time with what you're doing.
Yeah, you're fine at that point. That's totally fine. All right, so we have a vote for 6, which is Essence casting, and a vote for 3, which is recurring allies.
And a second vote for Essence casting.
Okay. So it looks like Essence casting is ahead, especially since I think
the vote that was above got changed.
Yeah, the vote that was above got changed, so that may be the only one that has a vote other than the one vote for 3.
Yes. Oh, there's another
vote for 6. Okay.
Looks like we're talking about Essence casting.
Looks like next Tuesday we're going to be talking to you about Essence casting. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. It should be good, and hopefully it'll be fun. So have a good week. We'll see you on Saturday, where we're going to talk about cumulative versus one-off benefits, which is kind of a fun topic too in game design. Then on Tuesday, we will specifically talk about Essence casting. And you know what? I think that maybe this topic, given that auto-attacking is a common topic on the subreddit, might be one that I'll put up on there. So if you see it on there, you can come and watch it again if you want. Bye, everyone. See you next time.